Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. All right, y'all. Welcome to the MMOA podcast. That stands for Modern Management of the Older Adult. We are doing an interview today with Sean Hanna. Sean Hanna is with PK Moves. I'm going to let him describe that organization and their mission. But Sean comes from the recommendation of several MMOA community members inside our Facebook group that are interested in parkour and older adults and how those worlds can really complement each other really well. So we're going to talk to Sean about application, about his story, about his organization, and walk away with some practical tips for all of us, whether we're a rehab professional or fitness professional, to better serve the folks that we work with on a daily basis. So Sean, welcome to the MMOA podcast. It's good to have you.
Good to be here, Dustin. Thank you.
Awesome. So PK Moves is the organization. What is the mission of PK Moves?
We are a 501c3 nonprofit that shares the transformative power of parkour with special populations, including unbelievably older adults and seniors.
Yeah, exactly. That can be shocking for some. And you know, we're going to go ahead and get address the elephant in the room of the stigma, the stereotype of parkour. Sean and I were talking before recording that anytime I've talked about parkour to friends and in a manner that I'm trying to share the power of this discipline and what it really means for our way of moving about the world, people inevitably, I know some of y'all are shouting it right now, the clip from The Office, shouting parkour left and right. Yes, that is not it. What is parkour, Sean? How would you describe it to someone that's a big Office fan?
It's not that, but it is, but it's also so much more.
Yeah.
Part of our mission in PK Move is to kind of deal with that stigma that's, partly the Office's fault, but it's also partly because the high level development of parkour has taken human movement places that look superhuman and crazy and unbelievable to most people. And so when you start talking about bringing this to older populations, the perception you run into takes, a very, you get the same response, and it's in two parts. And the first part is, oh, that looks so cool. And then the second part is, I could never do that. Right. And so we're trying to work on that second part because one, yeah, it is very cool. But two, yes, you can do that. And part of that is just understanding what parkour actually is. And the way we think of it as simply the art of locomotion, getting from here to there. And you don't have to jump. That's just one of the ways. Yeah. So one of the analogies I like to use with people is to think of it in terms of maybe martial arts or rock climbing, another multidimensional, multifaceted movement discipline that people of all ages participate in, but they wouldn't if they only saw the extreme end of it, right?
Yeah.
If you told your grandfather, like, hey, I think martial arts would be something you might enjoy taking up. He'd be like, no, I don't want to get into a cage and get the crap beat out of me. Like, that's just the 0.1%. Those are the people that take it all the way. Same with rock climbers. You could sign up someone in their 50s or 60s for rock climbing lessons in an indoor gym, safety equipment, instructors, and they would be very excited about it. But if all they saw was Alex Honnold, free soloing, like, no thanks. So we have to kind of battle through that same thing because parkour is, relatively new in comparison, at least new in the public consciousness. But from our perspective, it's the oldest thing that's ever existed. It's like the first human skill is locomotion. It's just we've paved over the world and made it geometrical, and we've had to adapt to it and give it a new name. And that's what parkour is. So So in PK Move, we have our flagship program, PK Silver, and that's how we've adapted traditional parkour conditioning and coaching and techniques for daily living, for just getting around the house, getting down some stairs, and making it interesting enough that you actually could learn a few new locomotive skills that make you want to go play, want to go explore, want to act like a kid again, which is, that's the essence of parkour. It's play. It's an advanced, considered form of play.
That's beautiful. I want to go back to for your journey of what was that kind of light bulb moment of realizing that this group of people would benefit tremendously from this discipline, the act of locomotion across, different settings. What was that light bulb moment like for you? Kind of what led up to that? Was there like a specific example, like, oh my gosh, this will change these people's lives? Because it's rather novel, right? Like we have our stereotypes of parkour and who does them, and it's usually not an older adult, but I think all of us can think about how it can benefit them for sure. But I'd just love to hear, what was that moment, that light bulb moment for you?
Sure. Well, that moment probably developed over a couple of years and led to the creation of this by our original founder, Nancy Lorentz. When I taught back on the East Coast in a parkour gym, the owner had the idea to start pushing it out towards older adults because we had been talking and collaborating. I was already in my 30s at this time. And I knew that there were applications for this beyond, what the teenagers wanted to show on YouTube and their show reels, and the basic lesson that we give everybody from age 3 to 90, if you come into a parkour gym, is we actually want you to be softer. We want you to land safely. We want you to be aware of impact. We want you to be able to control your momentum. So far from being like a reckless daredevil sport, so much of our instruction is about, you need to be safer. You need to be more aware. You need to do this. You need to do that. And so is there a way to scale it and make it appeal to people over 35 was the cutoff that we had, because we had very few people over 35 coming into the gym at that time. So we wanted to make it appeal to them. And so we wrapped that up in a class called 401 PK, a little riff on retirement accounts.
Love it.
And, that created a space for some of the parents that had joined the adult classes, which at the time was like 15 and up. Adult was 15 and up. And, there were a handful of parents that we were able to pull in off the sidelines and join once in a while.
That's awesome.
But there was one lady in particular, Nancy, who she was unique at our gym in that she was the parent who started in the classes first and brought her kids in later.
Really? That's awesome.
So for the longest time, it was her and a couple other, really badass older ladies in there with the teenagers, in a gym filled with graffiti and dubstep and sweat and, and it's intimidating for the average person, but they meshed seamlessly, but they still were kind of wanting to have just a space for themselves in a class together with them. And I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to try out on them. So that became 401 PK and that core group of people. Many of them are still involved with PK Move today.
Wow.
So we had that class going for a few months, and then Nancy was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she was determined to keep on her training throughout the entirety of the treatment. I was her head coach, basically. I had trepidation about it. I was a little concerned, but I said, okay, let's monitor this and, keep a close eye on it. And my background goes beyond parkour coaching. I've done rehabilitation, older adult fitness, post-surgical rehab, personal trained for many years. So I did have the knowledge and the tools to kind of monitor her performance and make sure we weren't pushing things too far. And, we got to the edge a couple of times because Nancy's a go to the edge kind of lady. And, a couple of times I had to pump the brakes on her, but she stuck through it the entire way. And
awesome.
To this day, will testify that parkour saved my life. Parkour got me through this. If I didn't have this space to express myself and express my movement, there's no way I could have kept my spirits up enough to fight through this disease. So
beautiful.
And from that experience, she was inspired to share that with others. And that turned into a Ninjas in Pink breast cancer awareness event that we put on, right? A pink ninja costume that she bought on eBay, white, dyed it pink, and did a whole class and raised some money and raised some awareness. And that was the genesis of PK Move.
Wow.
I left the gym and came to Colorado shortly after that. And she called me up a couple months after that and said, hey, I started this nonprofit. We're going to do more things like Ninjas in Pink. And we're going to work with veterans and seniors and Title I schools. And we're going to do everything. I'm like, whoa. What
you create a monster.
Yeah. She's like, can you just write some stuff down and tell us what we should do? I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. That was 6 years ago. And here we are.
Oh, wow. So the 401 PK class, if you go back to those first few months, what were some of the biggest changes that you saw in those folks? Like, how are they different after coming into that class in terms of the benefits that you saw, and maybe some that weren't even on your radar before you started that program?
As a fitness professional, it's changed my entire perspective on how to approach fitness. In fact, I rarely even use the word fitness anymore. And I'm wary on exercise, because what I've seen through these classes is when the person focuses on a goal outside themselves, like climb up a wall, completely arbitrary, right? Who needs to climb up a wall? Who needs to jump across the thing? Nobody needs to do that, but no one needs to bench press either. Really.
Yeah.
But what's the difference? They enjoy doing it. They look at it and it's a challenge outside of it. They forget about themselves. It's presentness. Like we said about play, when you can get somebody into a state of play, they'll actually work a lot harder. They'll get better results and they'll have a good time doing it. And they can't wait to show up for the next one, which is a totally different experience from the vast majority of trainers and myself in commercial gym environments where, right, your clients are trying to distract you from the workout, half the time, or they're slogging through it and saying, oh, you're torturing me. But,
right.
At a parkour class, I barely have to say a thing. I'm like, here's this thing, here's that thing. You're going to go with that thing and you're going to play around on this thing. Ready? Go. And then they're just kicking ass for 10 minutes straight. And then I have to tell them, all right, water break. This is great. This is great. And they're having a great time. And they're so much more focused on the movement itself. Yeah. And we all know as fitness professionals, the hardest thing to do with general populations is to get them out of their heads and into their bodies for even a moment. And yet I've seen it happen hours at a time in parkour class. They're just there.
That's beautiful. Yeah. What were... If we stay within that first kind of few months of 401 PK, what were some of the biggest mistakes that you made that really informed you going forward in terms of like mistakes that led to big lessons?
So once you get into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, especially in a class that welcomes that entire range, there's such a wide variance in reaction time, joint pain, injury history, right? So I wouldn't even think of it as a mistake, as just like a continual refinement of how much impact I'm willing to let people take. The central premise of parkour is if you can control impact, as in the literal amount of force you're applying to objects and getting back from you. Like you hear this when people land loudly. But you can hear it even when people walk unevenly as their feet slap the ground. Like all of that damages your joints. So just increasing my awareness of, just how much impact moving in 3-dimensional space creates on people. I still had a lot of lessons to learn because people were still coming down hard, or I would try to modify a drill and say, hey, you have to step down. But then they'd step down in such a way that they're still slamming their heels into the ground. There was just so many little technical refinements and things that I have ended up just having to eliminate altogether. If you were in the parkour community and you came to one of my 40 and over classes, for example, you would see almost none of the techniques that you would see in a regular quote unquote parkour class where people are jumping and landing and practicing dynamic impact. That's kind of the big difference is, that's the big lesson is impact is everywhere, right? If you walk down a set of stairs, depending on how you walk down it, you can do it softly and well, or you can just beat your knees up with every step. So one of the mistakes I made was trying to modify traditional parkour techniques for older adults, whereas what I ended up having to do, what I do now today, is I eliminate most of the techniques completely, and I have a whole new set of skills that play more towards certain forms of locomotion than others, right? So jumping from one place to another, that's a form of locomotion. That's an explosive dynamic form. Almost none of that in PK Silver. Whereas our crawling technique, our quadrupedal technique, there's an entire world of those skills that I never even knew existed before I had to create them for these classes.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's almost like you, instead of transferring techniques per se, you're transferring principles and things that you would see, across the spectrum. And I know when all the therapists that are listening and other professionals with the ground-based stuff, I mean, that's a big topic of conversation right now, especially in our world, is ground mobility, confidence, falls efficacy. Can people get to and from the ground well, efficiently, but then also do it in a manner that they're not scared to death? And I definitely know, your program is doing a good job in that department. I'm real curious with the program and like this hour or however long, the class that you'll typically do. What are you thinking about when you kind of organize this session? Like, what factors are you considering? What influences that kind of help you organize, that particular session for these folks? And in particular, like, are there things that come up to your mind? You're like, man, I'm not going to do that at all. You've already given some examples of some of the jumping from point A to point B, but just love to hear some other thoughts that you've kind of taken out of the equation in PK Silver.
You bet. And a lot of it is context dependent. For example, right before I came onto this, we had a virtual class where we teach parkour in your living room online to people across the country. So for a class like that, you have to consider what materials are you working with. You don't have a crazy cool parkour gym. You're not outside with 3-dimensional obstacles. You're basically in the living room. You've got maybe a chair, you've got a wall. Maybe you can throw in some toys or items, get a stuffed animal, get a tissue, get a dish rag. We come up with all sorts of things, but the idea is the principles should apply anywhere. You can teach quadrupedal technique. You can teach getting down to the ground and back. You can teach single leg standing. You can teach forefoot balancing and ankle stiffening, the ability to build up plyometric skill without actually having to jump, which is incredibly beneficial for your ankles and your agility. So that applies anywhere. From there, you try to tailor it to your people. So we have a licensing program that works with assisted living centers. Now, if you think the game in parkour changes past 40, boy, does it change again when everybody's in their 80s, and some of them are in walkers. Some of them don't want to go outside. Some of them are deathly afraid of just bending over. It's like, what kind of parkour are you going to do? Somebody who maybe they can hip hinge, but mentally they're terrified of doing so. So we use the same principles across all populations, but what you have to do in outlining a lesson plan for them is as best as you can, you have to try to put yourself in their shoes. I've never been 80 years old and terrified of movement, but I can imagine what it's like to be unable to do something out of fear, because I've been doing that for 15 years in parkour, coming up against the limits of my fear and recognizing that I either didn't have the strength for it or mentally I'm just not prepared to do it. So you have to try to empathize with the person's situation and think, what would my needs be? So one of the best ways I can think of that for myself is when I've had like serious injuries that debilitated me and I didn't have anyone to take care of me. Like I've had Achilles ruptures where I was in a boot and had to come up with a whole bunch of different movement patterns just to get around my house and make my day work. But severely limited and frustrated and scared and didn't want to fall. So that gave me somewhat of an insight into how these people are feeling every day, all day. So what are their needs? What do they actually care to do? Like, I want to come in there and be the fun drill sergeant / party clown and say, yeah, I'm going to teach you to crawl across the furniture. It's going to be the best day of your life. Right? Maybe that's not what they want. Maybe all they want is to break the fear of bending over. Maybe that's an entire class where we have to teach them, well, if you tilt your chin like this and you pinch your scapula like that. No, not like that, like this. No, not like that, like this. Maybe that takes 20 minutes just to get their scapula in alignment so that they're not top heavy and they won't start feeling like they're going to fall the moment they hinge at the waist. You know, so things like that happen all the time that aren't anticipated and then will cause me to rewrite the entire curriculum. It's like, you know, we did an hour on bending over today and it was great. I had a whole bunch of other stuff planned, but they had the same kind of breakthrough from fear to playfulness that we see in any, you know, teenage parkour class where they thought they couldn't do something. They were afraid and it could have created impact. Like that was that's a rational fear, right? Yeah. So, but with a handful of techniques, we actually got them bending over and then we got them bending over and twisting and then we got them bending over and catching a duck. And by the time they were done, they were actually having fun. They stopped being afraid. They started having fun. Parkour occurred. Yeah.
So for folks that there are a lot of listeners that work in ALFs or assisted living facilities, a lot of folks do home health, outpatient, kind of across the spectrum. What kind of objects, pieces of equipment are kind of vital from your standpoint, or would you recommend they have to do something like what you're doing?
Well, like I said, as we've seen in the online class, there's actually a ton of parkour you can do with the built environment, wall, chair, floor. But one piece of equipment that we kind of specialize in, and we send one of these to everybody who comes to an online or in-person workshop, is what we call a precision board or a precision train. I call it the porta-curb because that's kind of literally what it is. I'll grab one right here.
All right. For the podcast listeners and folks watching the video in the community Facebook group, we'll get a link and drop that so you all can. I'm just saying I'll drop a link for listeners and watchers so they can see this. What do you call it? A porta-curb?
That's my name for it, but
I like it.
We also call it a precision trainer because the idea is as soon as you have to be on a small elevated surface, it's just a 2x4. It's just a 2x4 nailed to other 2x4s. This isn't the official PK move.
Yeah.
This is one I made for myself with grip tape, but
I like it.
We have this in as many classes as we can in person and online when we can get people to build them. But the idea being is that what separates parkour from virtually every other kind of sport or activity is our playing environment is 3-dimensional. Almost everything else plays in 2D, but we are a 3-dimensional sport. We have edges and ledges and small surfaces and things that we have to navigate precisely. So our very first training tool, which you'll see in PK Silver or any parkour gym in the world, you'll see these and you'll see people just standing on them, learning how to balance, learning how to control the edge of things, learning how to be, you know, there's a nice metaphor in there about learning how to be on the edge, right? But quite literally, it doesn't just make your ankle stronger, but it actually makes you more confident when you're on something besides 2D. So just being able to play in 3D a couple inches off the ground, there's a ton of things that you can learn with that. So no matter what environment we're playing in, we always try to have some kind of small elevated surface to teach edge work. You could call it edge work.
Yeah, I could see tons of applications. So you're doing static, dynamic things on your feet, maybe some crawling on there or something with the upper extremities as well.
Yeah, a lot of single leg balance, a lot of little crawl stepping games. I could like take my headphones off and show you, but it's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah, we'll point people to the website, pkmoves.org, to be able to see some of those things and check out PK Silver. So with, let's say your class, and it's obvious, I think, just hearing your examples and us hearing, what a class looks like that seems very approachable, right? Like that is very modifiable to so many folks that we work with. What is bringing people into that class? Like what is driving their interest, and how are you really speaking to them to show that this is going to be beneficial for them? I'm just really curious, because I know not everyone thinks The Office, right? But I'm just very curious, like how are you reaching these folks, and what are some of the themes that you're seeing of what's driving them into a something like PK Silver?
Well, personally, as a fitness professional, I think there's a pent up demand for something different than, what we think of as traditional weightlifting, cardio, the bodybuilding paradigm, the bodybuilding / rehab paradigm where people are doing these, admittedly like safe, effective, mostly sagittal and frontal plane movement that will make your body function better, but it's not really how people move, is it? And so you see with things like the rise of MoveNat and other systems that are trying to bring a more holistic, more multi-planar, more three-dimensional viewpoint to fitness. There's I think people are like crying out for that, especially when so many people go to, I mean, if you've ever worked in commercial gym environments, like what's the big dirty secret of commercial gym environments? If everybody who actually signed up for a membership showed up, that place couldn't function.
Right.
So there's something, rotten at the heart of fitness where it's like our business model only works if most people don't come. What are you doing?
Right.
And then when they do come, what are they treated to? They're treated to the kind of same sterile, segmented office environment that we allegedly go to gyms and places like that to escape from. Yeah. So I think people feel, even if they can't articulate yet, that there's something deeper in fitness that's missing that would connect me to my movement in a way that's not about getting abs. It's not even about feeling healthy.
Right,
If everybody cared that much about their health, we'd all be in shape. But so but what we've offered them, under the banner of exercise and fitness, it clearly isn't working. It clearly isn't working. People are moving less than ever. We've had 40 years to reach them, and it doesn't seem to be taking hold. And that's part of the reason why is the movements themselves don't inspire. So I think there's a pent-up demand for that. And so when people see, when people are shown our message, I think it's the way we've tried to get it out there. I think it really connects with that inner part of them that's like, this looks fun.
Yeah. That
might work. Right. If it's fun, it might stick. And that's really, I mean, we build our whole curriculum around it. It's based on, sound exercise science principles, but we are not teaching you to exercise. We are teaching you to move. Yeah. And I mean, there's what's a more, instinctive thing than human movement, right, which is also the thing that's lacking now. Right. Yeah. So we're trying to tap into that, that hidden desire I think everyone has to play again.
That's beautiful. And I think of that, just when you're speaking about the fitness industry, of how, we feel that. I think, many people listening to this, let's say sub 60, you definitely feel that. You see that in the Globo gym. But then, think about your folks in the ALF, folks maybe in their 80s, that what they're used to and have come accustomed to from the offerings that are specifically for them are the sit and get fit, the very underdosed group activities that are usually in a chair, tossing a balloon, or maybe have some type of stretchy rubber band resistance or something along those lines. They're all probably half asleep, yawning throughout the whole class. And then you see something like what you're offering, just like the asymmetry is just even louder for that demographic of how different and novel and unique, which I imagine is very attractive for a lot of them to see, which is cool to say. Julie Brower said, I can see how the element of pure play, fun, and giving them that external focus, go climb over that, can be so powerful. Yeah. And I know, Yeah, many clinicians probably have lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, running through their head of like, man, how could I inject play into my sessions? Which a lot of the folks that are watching or listening, they're in kind of a one-on-one situation environment. But you can definitely do this in the context of so many different settings. So if folks are curious about PK Silver, where could they go to find out more information? Could you give us some more information on the coaching, training, and certification that you offer as well?
You betcha. If you go to our website, www.pkmove.org, we've got everything on there. We've got a workshops and licensing page. We've got PK Silver is its own section, and that tells you how to sign up for workshops or come to a class, or even do it live in person if you happen to live in the DMV, in the DC metro area. We do have a live class every week at a park, on picnic tables, on parking bumpers, hiding behind bushes, freaking out the normies every week.
The normies. I love it.
Yeah, and every while we convert one. So that's it. PKmove.org has everything.
Awesome. And there's some really good videos on there too. I really appreciate those. They've made their rotation through the MOA community Facebook group a couple times. But if you're not familiar with that, the link that you can click on will be in the show notes for this episode. Well, Sean, that was really cool. I appreciate you taking the time to share PK Silver with the community. I think from our standpoint, we're thirsty for this from the clinician side, just because, we feel that burnout as well in terms of, the E word, exercise, and the lack of play, the lack of fun in the context of our work. We're bored. We know our patients are bored. And this is something that could really inject some fun and play and get some good results as well. So I encourage folks to check PK Silver out. Get you a stuffed rubber duck here as well, like Sean has to use in your rehab sessions. But lots of good ideas here. And Sean, just appreciate you taking the time to hang with us.
Appreciate you giving me the opportunity, Dustin. This is my favorite thing, so it's my pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.